All right, thanks everyone. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for August, 16th of August 2021. Just a reminder that this meeting is being held in accordance with the Local Government Act variations, which permit electronic participation. We have 2 members participating electronically from outside of the council chamber. So the meeting will be recorded. It is a requirement for the recording that all members are visible in terms of face and voting, which is why we currently have the configuration with 2 cameras pointing in different directions. So the recording will need to show the front of the chamber, which is Mayor Brad and myself, the members in the gallery, plus the members who are not physically in attendance. On that note, I'll hand over to Mayor Brad.
Thanks very much, Matt. So, acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Barngarla people, the traditional owners of the land we meet on today, and their continuing connection to land, sea, culture and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our communities. The City of Port Lincoln acknowledges and respects the diversity of cultural heritage and beliefs within our community. As a council, we are committed to serving the best interests and needs of all people in our city, and we endeavour to discharge our duties conscientiously to the best of our ability. Thanks very much. Please be seated. Welcome to the gallery. Welcome to the press. Welcome elected members and staff. Present tonight, we have, and bear with me please, electronically we have Deputy Mayor Ritchie and Councillor Broadfoot. Present in the chambers we have Councillor Davis, Councillor Rousell, Councillor Davies, Councillor Staunton and Councillor Dodd. We have apologies from Councillor Jolly and Councillor Lynn. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations? Councillor Rousell.
I've got one, 14.1.5 though, regarding Centenary Oval. It's just a perceived conflict of understanding.
Abstain and vote if there's a voting.
Yes.
Yeah. And can you make sure you have the paperwork?
I've done that, the man has got the paperwork.
Good, thank you very much. Anyone else have any conflicts of interest? I declare a conflict of interest for myself with item 11.2 regarding a presentation from the Chief Executive Officer on Southern Launch. It is a material conflict and I will leave council chambers. Item 4 is a confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. So we're looking at a confirmation of the previous meeting held on Monday the 19th of July. Is there any discussion on it? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Staunton, do you want to speak on it? Councillor Rousell, do you want to speak on it? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 5 is adjourned items that are nil. Item 6, questions with and without notice. Item 6.1 is a question with notice from Councillor Broadfoot. Matt, do you want to cover that at all?
Through Mayor Brad, we can take that as written, unless Councillor Broadfoot's got the requirement to clarify anything there.
No, that's all fine. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Davies.
I'd like to ask a question without notice, if I can.
Sure.
I just wondered through Matt, what's happened with our IT backup system now that the BIC's moved, and if we're covered with the data backups.
Through you, Mayor Brad. Now, just also note that we've lost Deputy Mayor Ritchie.
Well, this video you want to be
Just the video. Through you, Mayor Brad. So in terms of the ICT disaster recovery scenarios, all of the backup data replication is at the library, not at the Visitor Information Centre. So there's been no change to that.
Yeah, but like because of the moving, that's still all good.
Yep. So just to clarify, there was no systems located at the former VLC that we use the disaster recovery or backups. It's all located at the library. So the corporate system that's based here at the Civic Centre gets backed up to the system at the library. Sorry, is that the nature of the question?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, all done.
With no more noted questions without notice.
Good. Item 7, notice of motion. There are none. Item 8, petitions nil. Item 9, deputations and representations. We have a deputation tonight from Clean Seas Seafood Limited. Update on the current operations and the ASC certification. CEO, Mr. Rob Grattan, and for information, I no longer have shares within Clean Seas. So I have no conflict. Come on out, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Very good. I'll keep that on.
I'll take it off while you're talking.
Great. Well, look, thank you everyone for having me today, and also I'd like to say thank you very much for the ongoing support that we enjoy as a company, as an industry in this region, and it's a pleasure to come and speak to you tonight. I know you have a long agenda, and I've probably prepared way too many slides, including a video. I'll send this to Matt, and Matthew, perhaps you can circulate for the convenience of the elected members to take a look at. But I'll rip through pretty quickly and hopefully leave a little bit of time for some questions at the end. So we're a public company based here in South Australia. Most or the largest single number of our shareholders are South Australians, and as you'll see in the presentation, we're very proud of our South Australian heritage and our, I guess, our Spencer Gulf provenance as well. And we have a lot of experience doing this. We farm yellowtail kingfish commercially, but we also have the IP to breed and farm southern bluefin tuna, mulloway, and snapper. We have access to great markets around the world. Indeed, more than half of our production is exported. Historically into high-end restaurants, so Michelin star restaurants, but increasingly through COVID sort of disruptions and our changing business model, we've seen our fish into specialty retail channels and supermarkets, which has helped us to have a record year just past, despite all of the interruptions from the pandemic that we continue to see. We talk a lot about our natural provenance, which I'll talk about today. It's an amazing product, a unique product, recognised globally. But what's really important to us is our sustainability credentials, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We're really a South Australian focused company, as you can see. We have a hatchery at Arno Bay. We also have some farming locations off the coast there. Our principal farming location is here in Port Lincoln, and we're working to establish a new full life cycle farm up at Whaler in Fitzgerald Bay. We have some leases at Wallaroo that we're not using at the moment, and our processing facility and corporate head office is in Adelaide. But as you can see here, that the heart of our business and company is on Spencer Gulf. Many of you guys will know this already, but we're a little bit different from some other aquaculture companies in that we're a full life cycle breeder and farmer of our species. So we have brood stock at Arno Bay. We warm those up and produce about 1 million fingerlings every year, put those to sea at about 50 days old, and grow those out over 13 to 15 months for our retail channel and 18 to 24 months for our premium restaurant channel. And so no fish come out of the wild in support of what we do as an aquaculture company, which is really important for us in terms of ASC certification. Friends of the Sea and HACCP is all about that sustainability footprint. And I did hear that part of the agenda was an update on ASC, and I'm very pleased to say that we've passed that again, and so our sustainability credentials will remain for another 12 months. When we talk about our fish, it's really important that we talk about the fact that we farm a native species in its natural waters. As I said before, our breeding program is about full life cycle farming, not taking any fish out of the wild in support of that program. Instead, we pick the best fish performing each year and replenish our brood stock through our own sort of breeding program to ensure not just high quality, but genetic diversity, and also to make sure that our fish are very much in keeping with the natural DNA of the population. We talk about our low farming densities, and we talk about the water of Spencer Gulf. And really, that's not just about, I guess, our corporate identity. It's actually about the biology of the fish. That means we talk about Spencer Gulf and the provenance therein. And really, that's about quality. So it's not just marketing speak, it's not just spin, it's not just where we come from. The water that we farm in here in Spencer Gulf is really important to this fish. And so the fish grows in the warmer summer months and puts on firmness of flesh and condition in the cooler winter months. And that's why we believe you can only farm this species in Spencer Gulf. I can say this as an accountant, but the accountant will tell you can farm the fish quicker in warmer water. That's why some people farm the fish in tanks in Europe, and some people are looking to farm the fish in sort of warm waters off the coast of Geraldton. And you get there quicker and arguably get there cheaper, but you can't get there with the quality. And we're absolutely committed to doing what we do here in Spencer Gulf, and that's why our fish is consistently awarded for its quality. The awards and accreditations I think really sort of do justice to that. The thing that we're really excited about with this fish is the opportunity that this fish has in the marketplace, and we've been very successful here in Australia. Essentially quadrupling the consumption of this fish here in the last 5 years. And indeed that per capita consumption, as you can see on the graph here, has gone from 20 grams per person per year to 80 grams per person per year. But if you think about 80 grams is still less than one portion per person every 2 years. A standard portion on a plate might be 160 grams. So while we've had great success and grown to record volumes, we're still very much a niche species. And if you compare that per capita consumption to Japan, they eat more than 1 kilogram of kingfish per person per year. And if you compare that to farmed salmon, where in Australia we eat 1.5 kilos, 1,500 grams in North America, over 2 kilograms of farmed salmon in Europe, you start to see the potential that this fish has. And really, when we talk about our fish, we talk about a high quality, sustainable, alternative to farmed salmon. And that's really what our marketing and positioning is about. So we have great, ambition for this fish. In opening the farm at Whyalla, we can go from our current production of about 3,000 tonnes a year all the way to close to 10,000 tonnes per year. But absolutely, we're committed to growing this fish in Spencer Gulf. And so you won't see us opening tank farms in Europe or growing fish in the warm waters of Geraldton or up in the north coast of New South Wales. We're absolutely committed to continuing to grow this fish in the waters of Spencer Gulf. And so that's where we doing all our work with PIRSA and SARD in the EPA to try and in a very sort of sustainable way increase our leases and to increase our level of production. And so, as you I said before, we do export this fish all around the world. We have principal markets in not only in Australia but also in Europe, in North America, and some quite good opportunities in Europe as well. And when we talk about our fish, we talk about the things that are important to us as a company. So it's sustainably produced, it's high quality, it's Spencer Gulf provenance, and really, a beautiful fish to eat raw or indeed consume cooked. And if you think about pre-pandemic, this business was all about high-end Michelin star restaurants. And really, if you look at high-end Japanese cuisine and the sashimi market, it's about red tuna, pink salmon, and white kingfish. They're the three premium species that you'll find in high-end restaurants, and particularly high-end Japanese restaurants. And so this fish in our business started out being in those top restaurants as an entree serve. So thin slices, sashimi slices, as you see here. And that's what helped us develop a really strong following with chefs. And we've had some great support from some very famous chefs both here and all around the world. But what we've really tried to do over the last 12 months is to show how fantastic this fish is as a cooked alternative. And so when you think about it, you take a piece of salmon home and you might grill it on the barbecue, that's an option for this fish as well. It's also fantastic baked in the Weber. It's terrific in a curry. And so it's a very flexible and versatile fish. And part of the reason we've been able to get our sales to over 3,000 tonnes and achieve some record sales levels over the last year, despite restaurants being shut and planes not flying and all of the disruption of the pandemic, is really helping people understand that this is a very flexible fish. It's a high quality fish, and for those consumers and restaurants and supermarkets that want choice and want a choice between an introduced species salmon down in Tassie with high stocking densities in the enclosed waters of Macquarie Harbour versus a native species grown in its natural environment with low stocking densities, we're about offering consumers that choice. And so we've done a lot of work in the last 12 months to really allow our fish to be positioned and available in many more outlets. So not just the high-end restaurants as an entree, but in those restaurants as a main course, in specialty retail channels and fishmongers, and increasingly in supermarkets. And so what we really are trying to do is to put this fish into restaurants and give consumers a choice. You walk into a restaurant and you have that choice: farmed salmon or farmed kingfish. And really, we think the results of this product sort of speak for itself.
But as you can see, it all comes back to our sustainability story. It all comes back to the provenance and look, everything we do and everything we talk about really has its heart here in the Spencer Gulf. And that's, I guess, the quick message that I'd like to leave you with. So that's my super quick run through of things. I don't reckon I can do it quicker than that, but I did want to leave a couple of moments for some questions or take any comments.
Through you, Mayor Brad. Rob, thank you. That was very informative. I
Thank you.
really appreciate the journey that hearing that story each time. Rob, I look at Spencer Gulf and I look at all the locations that you've got, and they're quite strategically planned. I mean, it's within, you've got a very strategic location where movement of infrastructure can go from one side of the Gulf to the other. My question is, what is your relationship with other fishers in the Spencer Gulf area? Because we have prawn fishing, we have tourism operations too, which are there at Whyalla. But in general, what are your relationships with, because you are farming and there is wild catching amongst them that's been important?
Yeah, look, I mean, I guess our relationship with the local industry, we think is a very good one. It's built on transparency and openness and sharing information. We've had some questions recently from the Prawn Fishers Association about the new farms up at Whyalla and what that might mean. We've had some meetings with the Conservation Council to allay some of their concerns. At the end of the day, this business was founded with a sustainability value. That's why we do full life cycle breeding and farming. But the amount of money that we invest in R&D is not just about product development and commercialisation. It's also about enhancing those sustainability credentials. And I think we've gone from good to very good, but we still transparently have some room to move to be great. And we're doing some really interesting work with seaweed producers to offset our carbon and nitrogen footprint. But again, our farming practices are about low stocking densities, not cramming fish into, really sort of, confined spaces. It's about fallowing leases and sites to make sure there's no impact on seagrasses around us. We work with PIRSA and SARDI and the EPA to make sure all of that information is publicly available and published. We don't hide from that because, it's really important for us commercially that people know where our fish and how our fish is farmed and can make that informed choice.
Any other questions?
Oh, not a question. I just want to say I absolutely love the packaging. South Australia, straight up there. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Rob, how are we doing with Fitzgerald Bay and not the calamari, that's a terrible
The cuttlefish.
That's it.
Yeah, look, I think, that's the spot we've got to go farming. So we think it's a good place to go farming. We understand that there are some, I guess, sort of concerns in the local community about how our fish may impact the cuttlefish population. All I'd say is that we trust the scientists in this respect. The EPA, SARDI, FRDC, PIRSA have all signed off on these leases and locations as an appropriate place to go farming. But the really interesting, exciting thing, I think, about that location is we're farming there for the first time in 10 years. And we've done a very extensive baselining exercise with the FRDC to look at nitrogen levels and seagrass levels. And so really for the first time, we have a clean slate and a clean history that we can then go and see, exactly what those impacts are. So, the scientists say there's no correlation. We work with PIRSA to make sure that the genetics of our fish are consistent with the genetics of the local wild catch population. We do all of our health monitoring to ensure that, if there was some fish escape or whatever it might be, that they're not going to cause any sort of harm on the local population. So, we're confident, but obviously that will all be the subject of pretty intense regulation. We've got fish going in there in about 4 weeks' time. So, it's all go as far as we're concerned, and we're very pleased to be, I guess, sort of setting up a new farm and continuing to grow the business.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, just a quick one. Rob, with the pressure on the natural resource for snapper fisheries, are you looking, I think you mentioned that you do have a license to produce snapper. Are you looking to venture into that?
We don't have a license to produce snapper, but we do have the IP to breed and farm them. We've done that sort of semi-commercially in the past, but we've made some offers to the state government to maybe help with the breeding program to replenish wild stocks. That's something we're happy to do from a learning perspective, and also as a community benefit. And we'll see where those sort of discussions take, but yes, we could drop 1 million snapper juveniles in about 8 weeks if we had to.
Drop them around his spots.
Yeah, just tell us when.
All right, any other questions for Rob? No, Rob, thank you very much. I understand that you pushed through pretty quickly for us. I appreciate that very much. Clean Seas is a pretty good employer in Port Lincoln. It's always interesting to hear what's going on from that point of view.
Very pleased, thanks, Mayor Brad. Thank you.
Thanks. So there's a recommendation there. Can I have a move to the recommendation? This is item 9. Councillor Staunton moving and second Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 9.2 is Youth Parliament. We've got Dylan Cowley and Lady Shania Richards. I'd like to come out and give us a quick presentation. Thanks, guys. Welcome. Welcome.
Hey everybody, I'd like to thank you all for having us here to talk about Youth Parliament and our experiences. Our talks might be a quick because we're just so excited to share the wonderful experience that Youth Parliament actually is. I've only been Youth Parliament twice now. This has been my second year, and I cannot recommend this program enough. It is run by youth for youth and has been like that for 26 years, which I mean by itself is already pretty outstanding. But then on top of that, the implementations of Youth Parliament, how it's run, it educates the youth of South Australia into politics. And when the youth are educated in politics, not only the federal government, but the state and the local governments start to reflect the true identity and views of the people. I implore the council, I thank them firstly, for the support that they've already given to Youth Parliament, myself and Shania included, as well as Tyreen. Unfortunately, he did have to pull out, but you know, life happens, unfortunately. Yeah, so firstly, I do thank you for your support, but I implore you to continue supporting the youth of Port Lincoln, because one of the ways that they will engage with the council is if they feel valued. And one of the ways to make them feel valued is to give them opportunities to expand their skills and their knowledge. Youth Parliament expands so many areas of skills to communication, public speaking, leadership skills, but then it's also the knowledge of the inner workings of Parliament. But even though Youth Parliament is an apolitical, non-partisan program, it teaches about the aspects of the different parties, how they work together and how things get done in Parliament. So I think that is all that I have to say for now. Like I said before, it's going to be short, but that also opens up the floor for many, many questions. I want to make sure that all of you guys have a clear understanding of what Youth Parliament does, what Youth Parliament is, and why it is so important. So please, if you have any questions at the end of this, feel free to shoot them our way, even if they sound completely ridiculous. And without further ado, I'll allow Her Excellency, the Youth Governor herself, Shania Richards, to take the floor.
Thank you. Val Willia, how good is the Honourable Dylan Cowley?
Yeah.
And how good is Youth Parliament? I'm sorry, sometimes I get too overexcited. Where are my manners? I am Lady Shania Richards, a 22-year-old Wangkatha Murning Bulang Gabron Najri Bangala woman from the Goldfields. I grew up between Calgary, Ezras and Port Lincoln, and with the generous help of the Port Lincoln City Council, which manifested as a sponsorship that had allowed me to go to YMCA Youth Parliament, South Australia, that I was encouraged to apply for by the Honourable Dylan and Lily. And as the fate would have it, I was successfully accepted into the Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation Committee of 2021, where I was honoured to be the Assistant Manager and Minister and main sponsor for our bill in the Legislative Council. I was also super grateful to participate in delivering the Acknowledgement of Country during the opening ceremony. Our bill was around Raising the Age of Criminal Responsibility Bill 2021, South Australia, which we managed to successfully pass through both houses with a unanimous vote. Being in that room where you could actually feel the power of the change of energy, listening to all the youth of Australia speak about topics close to our heart was a huge significant moment for me, as it showed me what I thought was never allowed, the possibility for our generation to be seen and heard, to be the change we want to see, and to know that the power is with the people. our people, and that our voices will be heard and can help in changing our world for a better place for the greater good of us all. The Youth Governor's motion of public importance, which spoke of extending the vote for all Australian residences, just made sense to us all, as did our deliberate motion that investigated our homelessness issue across all of Australia. Each of these bills that were debated were carefully thought out and crafted by the youth parliamentarians with such a mighty passion that showed that Australian youth has enthusiasm and dedication of communication, critical thinking, creative problem solving, and justice. A few that stood out for me personally and changed my perspective was the Death with Dignity Bill, Emergency Medical Services Reform, the Food Reduction Bill, and the Mandatory Consent Education Bill. These each blew my mind away. Quite frankly, I was moved by several of the agenda speeches that followed, which were given by my peers. Through them, I was brought to tears by the beautifully spoken topics, which carefully varied from cruel gay conversion camps, the toxic family abuse, domestic violence, mental health, homelessness, and sexual assault. Topics I never thought that these South Australian youth had personally experienced already at such a young, vulnerable age. From this, the flames in my heart grew more, and I knew I had no choice but put my hand up for the youth government elections, with the hope of being able to become the big sister and auntie needed to help guide our youth like I do within my own family. And as if this opportunity couldn't get any more magical for me, I was grateful and honoured to become the first female Aboriginal Regional Youth Governor of South Australia, first of my people. Where I'm currently already working on running a junior program for Parliament for next month. So if you have any family members or friends aged 15 to 12, sign up on the forms from the YMC page. Thank you so much for helping make my dream a reality, helping me accomplish my goals and supporting my journey. You are William Bow.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Is there any questions? Yeah,
I would just
Councillor
like to
Ratzer.
say that we've definitely spent our money well worth it.
I'm glad you think so.
It's amazing and so encouraging to see the way you two have spoken and your passion. You know, you are our future leaders and it is so exciting. So thank you and congratulations. I'm stoked. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You've done well.
Councillor Dave.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Brad. Well done, congratulations, and what a wonderful journey you've both been on. Can I ask how you both became involved in the Youth Parliament? What was the catalyst that maybe it was a moment in time somebody spoke to you, or you experienced at another forum, somebody approached you? How did you become engaged, and what recommendation or suggestions do you have for council to actually engage young people? How do we go about it?
Well, I actually saw an ad for Youth Parliament in the Port Lincoln Times. I decided that I was going to start buying it more regularly, and it just so happened to be a small ad in the corner of one of the pages. And so as I grow older, I'm getting more and more interested in politics, and I thought, well, it's a youth program, and I'm already 22 at that point. I'm 23 now, and I thought, well, I don't have many years left to be even considered youth, so I better give it a go. And yeah, it is just a fantastic program. In terms of getting more people to apply for it and getting more people involved, the best part would be to get engaged with schools. Lots of the people that I met over there, it was their teachers and their principals who had said, hey, this program would be really good for you, you should try it out. And then also some councils already have some sponsorships, yeah. They already have sponsorships reserved specifically for Youth Parliament, and they let that know. They team up with their local papers and radio and stuff like that. So there is a lot that a council can do to help get that get the knowledge out of Youth Parliament. Yeah.
What was your
So personally, it was Dylan and Lily that got me involved. We were just at rehearsals and Passionate Productions, and they were like, "Hey, since you know you love food stuff, do you like politics?" And I was like, "You mean I'm allowed to love politics?" And so I was like, "Hell yeah!" Because really, honestly, growing up, and especially between the West and South Australia, if you don't really have networks or connections, you have no chance. And so because, you know, it's coming from the bush, being that one random kid that wants to do something, I had no real way or knowing that there was a direction possible until like, I thought I had to, you know, become a lawyer, wait until I'm 40. I legit, I thought that was politicians. And then when Dylan Billy was like, no, anyone can do it. You just gotta be willing to put your hand up. And I was like, oh yes, that says everything I want to do. And so from there, I made great networks and connections and found literally my people, like everyone who are like me, you know, the wallflowers, the ones that are different. It was great to connect with them and know that, yeah, we are nerds, but that's okay.
So just another quick question. Do you see that council has a role in facilitating it as well as providing some funding to go? I understand that Whyalla have a staff member, it is a part of her portfolio, or it has been in the past, I'm not quite sure. If you have any recommendations around that, that maybe even you might like to speak with Matt about later, it doesn't have to be necessarily a response now, but some conversations around that later.
Yeah, because following what Dylan said, a lot of the advertising, that was a really big thing because a lot of, like I was saying before, if you don't know what's possible, how do you put yourself out there? And so for a lot of the youth, they have the passion, they have the need, they just don't have the direction. And that's where I wanted to come in as Youth Gov and like guide them back to the path, be like, hey, there's something for everyone. You just gotta make sure and find out what you really want out of the experience yourself and not what other people want from you. And that's a big thing with kids, especially with peer pressure. Like they'll be too shy to go to a workshop or go to an event to learn about nerd stuff because you must be a nerd, you know? So it's about appealing to them in a way that makes it seem cool, that being interested in your future is the new cool thing. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well done. Thank you.
I can just clarify there, Brad. Just for the record, I don't think politics is nerd stuff. As someone who has qualifications and a background in IT, that is nerd. So don't try and claim that territory. Okay?
That's really good. Thank you very much. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the council and the elected members here that we really appreciate the time and effort that you've gone into to be engaged at this level, and I'm sure that it will always lead to higher and bigger things. Good stuff.
Thank you for representing us.
Yes.
It's an honour.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a move for the recommendation there, please. Councillor Staunton and second Councillor Davis. Is there anything else? No, all those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 10, elected members' reports. My Mayor's activity report hasn't been received, but I must be frank with you, there's not much in it, to tell you the truth. I've been working in Adelaide for the last 4 weeks during the week and back here on weekends. However, I can say that the CEO and I attended the Norwood Football Oval on Friday night on the invitation from the Norwood Football Club from the SANFL. They're very, very keen to be engaged in having a match over here. We hope for a couple of seasons. We're still working on that. Very, very keen to be engaged in the tourist aspects of their supporters coming across here. They're working on that to create packages. And they're also working on the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Together, we're looking at really reinvigorating that side of things so that we can get youth guidance, leadership and teamwork, I suppose, the key aspects that fall out of that. So Matt's been working diligently with his crew to make sure that we're an attractive proposition, particularly when it comes back to having an SANFL footy match, one per season at the Centenary Oval, so that we can provide spectacle and some tourism for the peninsula itself in general. Matt, do you want to say anything else on that one?
No, I think, Mayor Brad, just to reiterate, I guess the very heartening thing to see was the address, the pre-game address by the president of the Norwood Football Club, who made it very clear to the representatives from the SANFL and also the SANFL Country Football Association that were there that they intend to hold matches in Port Lincoln, subject to obviously negotiation with the league, with appropriate clubs who may actually be able to play here. So I think there's a very strong statement of intent there from the President, which was echoed. It was good to hear on the night. I think the other thing there is their very strong commitment to promoting the Eyre Peninsula, and I think when we're talking about numbers of people who were at the function, there would have been 20 or 30 people from the Eyre Peninsula, various different businesses and associations represented there. So very strong connection between Ball Club and the EP, which will continue to develop.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I had a drink with Councillor Rousell, who was over there making out for someone else. Okay, Deputy Mayor's report. Jack, do you want to give us a heads up? I don't know if there's much there either.
Only the council workshop, so that's the only thing in that period.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Councillor Broadfoot, we've got your written documents here. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Councillor Rousell, anything else to add to your written?
No, that's all there was.
Councillor Lynn, he's not here. However, there is an apology from Councillor Lynn, which I will read. Councillor Lynn contacted the Chief Executive Officer on Friday the 23rd of July 2021 in relation to the following, advising of his wish to provide an apology to Council due to an oversight in relation to the status of the Port Lincoln sub-branch of the RSL, of which Councillor Lynn is the President. As a food registered business, despite the catering functions of the RSL being contracted to a third party. The apology relates to an oversight in relation to failure to declare a material conflict of interest when considering the introduction of food inspection fees for food registered businesses, and Councillor Lynn has completed a self-referral to the Ombudsman in accordance with Part 3 of the Code of Conduct. Councillor Lynn makes the following apology to Council. I wish to apologise to Council for this mistake. In any future discussions regarding Council food inspections, I will declare a material conflict of interest and leave the meeting. The end of the apology from Councillor Lynn. Councillor Jolly is on leave. Councillor Davis.
Just the other workshop that was held.
Thank you.
Fussed about it being recorded.
Yeah, Councillor Davies.
Yeah, the workshop.
Councillor Staunton.
Nothing to report.
Okay, it is quiet in the middle of winter. Councillor Dodd.
Just the workshop.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Just a question, Mayor Brad.
Yes, Councillor.
I'm just wondering, did you need a mover to accept the apology from Councillor Lynn, or that's just going to be tabled as read?
Got to me just before I was about to ask advice on that. So, Matt.
Through you, Mayor Brad, and due to the fact that Councillor Lynn is absent from the meeting, it may be more appropriate to clarify that. And I'm sure Councillor Lynn will probably want to provide a verbal apology to Council directly in person. So I think that being noted in the agenda should be sufficient for this point in time, I think.
Okay, so if it could just be noted and we'll look at the next.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Booker. Item 11, Chief Executive Officer, items for discussion. The following items are listed for discussion by the Chief Executive Officer. Now, while there are 3 there, I'll stay for the first one, leave the second one, and come back for the third one. So over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. So this is just a new little piece in the agenda where I thought anything that's topical that's coming around that may need to just be put on the radar but doesn't sort of warrant a full report in the agenda. This gives me the opportunity to provide updates to Council. So the first one in there is the SA Water desalination plant. So we're still working through the processes with SA Water. The consultation is ongoing. Myself and Deputy Mayor Ritchie are now both on the industry reference group. So there's a meeting of that group on Wednesday, and that's the consultation mechanism for SA Water to work through the implications of the proposed locations in Port Lincoln with key stakeholder groups and representatives from various different seafood industries. Obviously, the key concern there is the impact on Boston Bay and the other bay areas as a result of the sucking of the water into the desal plant, which is the intake, and then the outlet, which is the deoxygenized, but also higher salinity water going back out into the bays as well. So just working through that process. As far as we are aware, council may recall the previous workshops and presentations we had from SA Water that their timeline was approximately July to have a preferred location for the desal plant. As far as I'm aware, there is still no one single preferred location. You'll recall the maps that we had access to, which had 5 locations on them. As far as I'm aware, there's still the 5 locations we're talking about. Over the next few weeks, as well as being involved in the industry workshops, we'll also be having some conversations directly with key stakeholders, and we've been approached by several just to raise their concerns directly with council. So we'll be working through that. Council doesn't have a formal position on the desal plant at this point in time, and that's largely because there is no single identified location at this point. But it is going to be a situation where likely in the next 6 to 8 weeks, as we work through the industry reference group and we work through some of the consultation directly with other key stakeholder groups, the council will need to establish a position on the desal plant proposal. And foreshadowing, at a minimum, it's probably going to be similar to the EPLGA position, which is we appreciate the need for water on the Eyre Peninsula and the Lower Eyre Peninsula in particular. We appreciate that you've got challenges with the Sleaford location, the proposal there. We appreciate that you're looking at locations within Port Lincoln, which will have impacts on the Boston Bay area. But we would also appreciate that if that doesn't go ahead for whatever reason, that you don't lose time by starting to plan a third fallback plan or location and start looking into investigations around that now. Because I guess the light at the end of the tunnel or looking forwards, if the concerns of the seafood industry can't be ameliorated through the science and what's proven through the studies and the consultation, it's going to be very hard for council to support that and not to support the industries within the community. What that means is if we progress 12 months down the process, we've lost another 12 months without having firm plans in place for a desal plant. So the foreshadowing the position of council is likely going to be pushing SA Water for other alternatives and to explore them concurrently along with the proposed locations within Port Lincoln. So that's just a process that will flow through, but likely in the next 6 to 8 weeks, council will need to start formulating a formal position on the desal plant projects.
So just in addition to that, Matt and I met with the mussel industry early on Friday morning, where they put their case across to us, and they'll probably wind up with a deputation, I should expect, at some stage. I suppose there's 2 key elements here. Is that we need water for the city, but we also don't want to destroy our own industries to ensure that we get it. So a difficult position that we're all wind up in. So
yeah, so that's just for information. Yeah, just noting the next one on there. So there's no recommendations of moving, but we'll just note in the minutes that Deputy Mayor Ritchie will take the chair, assume the chair. So just in relation to Southern Launch, we have now received formal notification from the Attorney General, Deputy Premier, Minister for Planning and Local Government, on the release of an environmental impact statement by Southern Launch. That was advanced notice that came through late last month in July. And we've now received confirmation that the consultation period on the environmental impact statement for Southern Launch's activities or proposed activities at Whalers Way will be open from the 5th of August through to the 16th of September. So the key thing there is that we'll be asked to promote, and this has only come through in recent days, the public information sessions. So the Attorney General's office will be holding public information sessions in Port Lincoln on Tuesday the 24th of August Port Lincoln Hotel. Session 1 is 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Session 2 is 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. But that is in relation to consultation on the environmental impact statement that's been released by Southern Launch. Now that relates to the longer term planning approvals which are going through major planning processes at state government in relation to longer term approvals for launch activities. Southern Launch has received an interim permit for trial launch activities, and that was granted by the Australian Space Agency. And that's valid from the 9th of August through the 31st of December this year. So we have also received notice in the last week or so in relation to a confirmed test date or a test launch on the 9th of September 2021. So again, I just provide this information as key background because there will be two things happening. There will be the test launches occurring out at Whalers Way, the first on the 9th of September 2021. Technically, it's outside of our jurisdiction. In terms of it's not within council's remit, it's within the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula area. But secondly, because as the public consultation is about or is underway in relation to the environmental impact statement, it may be something that comes across council's radar, particularly as the sessions are going to be held in Port Lincoln. That's just that one. If there's any questions on that, happy to take them. I haven't reviewed the environmental impact statement at this point in time, but it's something I intend to do in the coming weeks.
I've got a question through you, Deputy Mayor Jack Ritchie. Is it usual for the consultation process to be backdated?
The consultation process isn't backdated. It's the notice. So we received notice on the 17th of July of the pending consultation.
Okay.
And then the notice was published, but then there was reference to myself receiving a follow-up notice when the consultation was to be launched. I didn't receive that, but we've received correspondence around the notification dates through a third party to council. So I think we've just not received one of the correspondences that we should have received.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're happy with that. I'll bring Mayor Brad back. Just the last item in there, noting Mayor Brad is free into the chamber. Joint council meeting. So we're just working through tentative dates. The intention is that we'll have the tri-council meeting between Lower Eyre, Tumby Bay and City of Port Lincoln at this point sometime in mid-September. So we'll confirm those dates and get those out in calendars shortly. So that's pretty much it. So again, I'll use this section of the agenda just to provide some verbal updates on things that don't warrant a full report, but just so that council's across and that's the background on it. Thank you.
Hopefully they will talk to us.
Where would it be held? Where's that one?
Oh, we're hosting it. Yeah, so we're hosting. That's why we're arranging that one. Yeah.
Okay, item 12, council committee reports and minutes. Confirmation of the minutes of the Peninsula Regional Assessment Panel meeting held on the 9th of August. Is there any discussion on that at all or clarification for it? I will move to the recommendation, please. Councillor Rousseau, second Councillor Davis. Nothing else? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 13, Chief Executive Officer reports, resolution status report. Matt, talk on that.
Just as written there, Brad, so there's only 3 items remaining outstanding now, and just to note that the items which are now included in other processes, we will actually remove them. So then the items in purple, we will remove them from the next action report update. So we will only be reporting on items in process or outstanding.
Okay. Is there any clarifying questions required? No, can I have a move then, please? Councillor Staunton, would you like to speak on it, Don? Second, Councillor Dodd. Want to speak on it? Any statements for or against, questions? All those in favour? Motion carried.
Mayor Brad, excuse me, but I'm just noting that elected member Broadfoot as well as deputy mayor are putting their hand up to move in second, and I'm not quite sure whether you're able to see.
Yes, I got it.
Okay,
Come
okay.
in.
Sorry, I wasn't aware. I just thought I'd ask because I'm
No,
seeing
that's
that hand go up and down. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 13.2 is the disbandment of the City Strategy Committee. Over to you, Matt. There's
Thanks.
not much to talk on that, I don't think.
Mayor Brad, so I guess this is just a follow on from previous reports where we effectively put a pause on the City Strategic Committee meetings. The committee was created in January 2020 as a result of a review of 3 other committees. I think of the thoughts that I've expressed in previous council meetings on the need for this committee the same. And the recommendation there is that we focus more on the council meetings on a monthly basis, and we have workshops and briefing sessions on key matters as and when required, just to bring the level up to the level of information that elected members up to where it needs to be before making decisions, but that we reserve committees for specific processes if we need to have, for example, the project board for a major project, or if we need to have a consultative committee for a certain function or area, but the notion of having a city strategic committee which is effectively vetting all the reports that are going to go to the council the following meeting doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of duplication of governance or arrangements there. So the recommendation is that they revoke the previous resolution of council from January 2020 to create a committee.
Clarifying questions? Councillor Davies?
Through you, Mayor Brad. I'm just like going, I think this is great.
Question?
Great thing, but my question would be, will we be, we used to have 2 meetings a month, or council meetings a month, because some of the information and you know, council voting needed to be done quickly to keep staff, you know, moving, like to be able to be productive. Is having 1 monthly meeting, because we went from 2 to this strategy committee meeting and a meeting. That was the reason, like we stopped doing the 2 management meetings, the 2 council meetings, to do one of this and one is, oh, I can't talk with this thing on my mouth. So I was just wondering, will we go back to 2 council meetings now that, and hopefully be able to be productive, you know, give the staff more production time and answers that they need to do to keep things moving? Sorry, but I was just had to
No,
take
that's
that
right.
off.
Through Mayor Brad, my personal view on that is no, for a number of reasons, but I guess ultimately the council meeting cycle is to be determined by council. My views on that would be, if we've got 2 meetings a month, I would question the quality and time put into the reports to produce them on that basis. Producing reports and agendas is usually a time-consuming process in terms of the week leading into writing the reports, as well as the week of finalising the reports and the agendas. By spreading that out across 2 meetings a month, you're actually duplicating the anxiety and stress that goes into agenda creation and reports. I'm not 100% comfortable. I don't think we're 100% there in terms of the quality of reports that we're providing at the moment. I think that's a work in progress and we'll still continue to work on that. I would much rather be in a situation where we're having 1 monthly meeting, which is the decision-making meeting. We're providing better structure around that. We can organise our internal operations and our internal administration around that schedule. And then if there's anything that comes up that's time sensitive, we call a special meeting. And a special meeting can be called at 4 hours notice, but you need to have significant time requirement to call a special meeting. But that would be my thoughts and process on that. But at the end of the day, it is council's prerogative in terms of setting the schedule and the time for meetings. But my recommendation would be that we flow with one. That creates the environment where we can organise our administration, but it also forces staff to be organised in terms of understanding what needs to go to council at what time, and we start forward planning our work rather than being responsive with our work.
Is there any further clarifying questions? No, can I have a mover then, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it?
Just a quick comment on,
You take your mask off while you're talking.
I support the recommendation as it stands, with one request, if at all possible, to give some thought. Some of the more lengthy reports, such as open space report or strategic planning reports, are distributed well before a monthly meeting. So there's ample opportunity to analyse and prepare questions, rather than come out with a fixed agenda towards the end of the month. That would be my only request.
I mean, through you, Mayor Brad, I think, as I said, if we can work around the structure and we get to a level of organisation internally, ideally, we would be having the agendas out. I mean, we're meeting the minimum requirement at the moment, which is 3 clear days. Ideally, we would like to get the agendas out at least 5 clear days prior to meetings. That would be, just gives the additional 2 days. But it does mean that we've got to change our administration in terms of our organisation internally, but that would be the case with that. And again, with the workshops, we did do a workshop on the principles of the open space strategy, but again, timing available, we would have had this to be distributed at the workshop, which would have been another 2 weeks to read that prior. We didn't have the opportunity to do that this time around. But certainly take that on board, and that would be the intention, is to get the agendas out additional 2 days of it.
Can I have a second, please? Councillor Broadfoot. You want to speak on it?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thanks. Can I have any statements for or against, or questions? Councillor Davis.
I'd just like to support this. I think that there's been an evolution of meetings. We've had a lot of subcommittees over time. Prior to even these 3 committees, there was a strategic planning group. And what happened was the fact that that small cluster of people made recommendations that came through minutes. And what happened that sent the cat amongst the pigeons was the fact that the recommendation was not necessarily adopted by the full council by that subcommittee. So I think what we've got replaced with great workshops, great information, brings us into a more formal situation here that we can and are doing a good job, and staff supporting us to do the job of making decisions here with a lot of good information that's come forward. So I do agree with Councillor Dodd that we actually get some of those bigger documents a little bit before. We are required to maintain confidentiality around that, and I think we need to be very responsible about that when we do get those documents at an earlier date. So thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a statement for or against, or questions? Okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Just bear with me, guys, because I'm trying to look at different screens and work out who I am. Okay, so item 13.3 is the draft open space strategy 21-26. Matt, just before we get into it, huge amount of work, an unbelievable amount of work. Really great progress for the city as far as I can see. Anyway, that's my 2 bobs worth before I'm supposed to talk anyway. So over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. So just to clarify, draft open space strategy 21-26 is this document. So I do apologise, it's 58 pages, but hopefully it's 58 pages of what is easy to read and understand and makes sense in terms of where we need to head with the open space strategy. Just quickly to recap on, firstly on the recommendation that's before council tonight, and then some of the backstory behind that. So The recommendation firstly is that council endorse the draft open space strategy to go to community consultation from Thursday 19th of August through to September 9, which is a standard consultation process to go out and seek views and feedback from the community on the draft open space strategy. The second part of the recommendation is that council provide support for the upgraded Wade Reserve and endorse the actions of the CEO in preparing a preliminary design for funding applications for the Open Space Grants Program, which does close on the 27th of August in accordance with the Annual Business Plan 21-22. The third part is that the council providing principal support for the development of a dedicated dog park at Nelson Square and endorse the actions of the CEO to instigate expedited planning process for the reserve, including identification of potential surplus land that can be sold at a later date. We don't have to have a conversation right now around whether we're selling land or not. We just need to be aware that we identify area that could be sold at a later date. And there's obviously some processes we need to go through to facilitate that sale, if that's the way we want to proceed. And then the fourth part of the recommendation there is the council authorise the CEO to initiate community consultation on both plans, being Wade Reserve and Nelson Square, once concepts have been developed to a sufficient point to allow constructive consultation. So I'll go into the background in that now. So first and foremost, in relation to the draft open space strategy, this is a document that started in 2015 through various work with URPS and sub-consultants Wax Design, but also with previous management here at City of Port Lincoln. The work culminated in community consultation and a draft strategy in 2018, which went out to community consultation in August 2018, with a view to coming back to the September 2018 council meeting with recommendations to implement the strategy. That process was never finalised in September 2018, and therefore the draft strategy was never endorsed or adopted. The key thing we need to remember is when we have strategies in place, we have a clear direction on where we're going to concentrate our resources and our energy moving forwards. In lieu of a strategy in regard to open space, it's left a vacuum over the last few years in terms of priorities for planning open space reserves, allocating funds for maintenance, and how we actually step forward with planning our open spaces. So we're in a position now where before we undertake any more reserve planning priorities in the next 4 or 5 years, we need to endorse the open space strategy. But given it's been a few years, it makes sense to put it back out to community consultation and get some further feedback from the community. One of the key changes between the 2018 document and the document you see presented tonight is a simplification. So the 2018 document, upon review, was a review document. It was a very comprehensive document that basically stated the matter of fact of what the current situation with our open spaces was. And it detailed 10 pages of operational actions, which is not really the level of information you should have in a strategy document. Your strategy document should be talking about principles, goals, and high-level actions. So the draft document you see before you this evening has a reasonable amount of content from the original 2018 document. It talks fundamentally about a supply-demand model. So supply being the existing amount of open space that we have within the City of Port Lincoln, demand being how much space should we have, but then what is the breakdown in use of that space, how are we maintaining it, how are we guaranteeing access to it, what are the other things like environmental conservation that we need to consider in terms of how we manage our open spaces. But more importantly, we've tried to define 6 key goal areas that really should underpin our priorities over the next 5 years when it comes to open space management. But we've still identified guiding principles throughout the open space strategy, which will influence the way we think about our open spaces and how we develop reserve maintenance plans and strategies and funding for that as well. So the document is largely content from the original 2018 document, but overlaid with a goal action sequence and really focusing on some of the guiding principles in there. I think the other thing we've added in, which is on the second last page, is actually clearly identified the reserve planning priorities for the next 5 years as well. And again, this is important from the perspective of actually saying to the community, this is our commitment around what key reserves we will do planning for in the next 5 years. In terms of where we view it, this is what we view as the highest need in terms of the context of the supply demand model, and we need to put effort and resources into doing these reserve plannings. So the key ones in there, Wake Reserve, Nelson Square, both projects which are identified in this current financial year. Murray's Point, Harbourview Reserve, Flinders Park, 3 other priority areas that need, in our opinion, reserve planning, and then a consideration for Seaview Park Reserve later in the 5-year period. And I think the Seaview Park Reserve plan needs to have an asterisk on it, because it really depends on how much money we invest into Wake Reserve. Wake Reserve is around 450 metres from Seaview Reserve, and if we're creating what we'll call sort of a neighbourhood, an elevated neighbourhood level reserve, which is almost a regional reserve at Wake Reserve, then it somewhat mitigates the need to actually look at Seaview Reserve, and Seaview Reserve could be a future discussion for disposal of that land as well, but we put that in there as a year 5 project. Sporting reserves, so we've identified in there that we really would like to undertake master planning at Centenary Oval and Ravendale Sports Complex. There's a precursor to that, and the precursor is that we need to complete the sport and recreation strategy this financial year, and then from the sport and recreation strategy we want to do master planning of the actual physical facilities. And the reason for that is that council really should have more say and more involvement in facilitating the planning up front for these key sporting facilities, particularly when we already know that we've got interest from several parties for some of the land on the brink of on the edge of Centenary Oval. We have seen what's happened in the past when sporting clubs get involved in creating their own infrastructure, particularly when it's large infrastructure, and we need to learn from that. We need to be there on the ground floor, driving, facilitating and creating the master planning process for these reserves, which then sets about the context of how we fund as a community, not just council, the development of these reserves. And the last one in the reserve planning table is the Valley Park Drainage Reserve, which again is contingent on the stormwater management plan, but it is identified in there as one of the key projects in the context of the need to review and look at the LeBrun Street pump station and the whole setup down LeBrun Street there, Burn Terrace. It makes sense to bring the Valley Park Drainage Reserve into this financial year and have that planning done as part of the stormwater management plan. So that's the open space strategy. There shouldn't be too many surprises in there. And again, the key changes are really just updating the content, updating all the maps, introducing the key goal areas, focusing on the principles, but then defining the reserve planning priorities for the next 5 years as well. So that's the first part of the report. The second part of the report is noting that we've got the 2 annual business plan projects identified in this year's budget. The first one being Wake Reserve. Now, council allocated $125,000 in the annual business plan this year on the basis that we would use that as leverage money, and we would seek $125,000 from the open space grants program, which closes on the 27th of August. So what we're working to at the moment is concept design for Wake Reserve, and you can see a snapshot of preliminary design in the agenda, and we're working through finalising that ready for submission by the 27th of August. That funding announcement won't be made until December, so that project won't start until at least January, February next year. But what we need to do between now and the 27th of August is finalise the concept and the grant application, and that's being developed by Damien McQuillan, who coincidentally grew up 2 blocks from Wake Reserve. So he actually played there when he was a child. And then after the submission on the 27th of August, part of the resolution tonight is to authorise myself as CEO to push that out to community consultation so we can start the community consultation process on that concept design. Noting that post-application, we will have several months to work through the consultation process. And I'm confident that we're going to have strong engagement from the community, the local residents in the surrounding areas, but also in the school groups and the conversations we've had in terms of finalising, providing feedback into that design process. The second annual business plan project is was broadly described as open space projects, potentially including a dog park, is the conversion of Nelson Square and the creation of a dedicated dog park at Nelson Square. And for that to be also have identified land that could be made available for future sale. So one of the key goals in the open space strategy is to develop and create an open space reserve fund, so that when council considers any land to be surplus and disposes of that land, the sale proceeds go into that reserve fund. That reserve fund then gets used for further upgrades to open spaces and public spaces, but it also gets used as money that can be leveraged off state and federal funds to enhance the amount of money that we can spend on open space projects. Nelson Square is a prime example of a reserve, and if you can visualise from the bus tour that we did up there, the tennis court area on the lower side is effectively prime real estate that could be subdivided off and sold into allotments. Potential to realise $1 to $1.5 million worth of revenue from a sale of that portion of the land, which could go directly into an open space reserve fund to fund future upgrades to public spaces and reserves. The upper half of Nelson Square is a combination of native vegetation and open space at the moment. And that's the area where we'd be looking to develop the design for the dog park, but also incorporate that into the existing native vegetation that's there and keep as much of that as unstructured recreation space as possible. So the recommendations tonight are the draft open space strategy, and the recommendations can either be moved en bloc, or if elected members want to move them individually, that's fine as well if they need to be broken down. But the recommendations are to endorse the draft open space strategy to go out to consultation, to endorse the support for the Wake Reserve project, and I'll finalise the grant funding application by the 27th of August with the concept that we're developing up with Damien McQuillan. Endorse in principle Nelson Park and the concept of the dog park, dedicated dog park being created at Nelson Square, and we're working through the design of that at the moment, and Wax Design has been engaged to develop a preliminary concept for Nelson Square. And then the final thing is, rather than us needing to come back to, and we can, rather than us needing to call a special meeting of council to look at those two concepts, is that you authorise the CEO. I'm happy to circulate those concepts via email prior to actually push those concepts out to consultation, just to say calling us back in for a special meeting, but also to then not lose another month before the next council meeting. How do you take this?
Okay, just before I go into clarifying questions, can I get an understanding from people as to whether they want to move this on block or individually by number? On block? Any objection? No? Okay, that's good. Okay, clarifying questions, please. Councillor Staunton.
I was just going to ask about the open space strategy, community gardens. I know I missed the workshop, but it was identified at Arteria when they sort of got a bit sparked up and were questioning the use and useful purpose of Arteria. One of the ideas was brought up in that process was a community garden being put at Arteria and having those user groups there. Just wonder if that could be an option, an extra option to go into potential places. And since their guiding principles mentioned about in cooperation with other groups, you've got groups right there, whether they'll be an optional addition, potential.
Mayor Brad.
Can we make amendments to the?
Yeah, we can endorse it with amendments. Mayor Brad, what through you, Mayor Brad, what I would suggest is there was no reference to Arteria in any of the previous drafts of the open space strategy. So if you're happy to move it with the amendment to add that in, that's okay. What I would suggest is that we would move it as is, but I'm happy to write directly to the users of our area as part of the consultation process to see whether they think it should be included as a potential location.
Okay with it? Yeah, good. Mr. Dodd, you had a question?
Yeah, just clarifying, on the chart for the reserve planning priorities for 5 years, do you think you may be creating an expectation that those projects might be pursued and capitalised, actually developed?
Well, I think through you, Mayor Brad, that would be the intention, is that if we're planning the projects, that we would then in the subsequent years be working on how we fund the projects. And that's the intention behind the Open Space Reserve Fund. I guess what we want to avoid, and this is the example of the vacuum by not having the strategy in place, where council goes about planning a reserve that it doesn't have the financial capacity to deliver on, in terms of the context of Puckridge Park and the $3.5 million development concept of Puckridge Park. So the intention here would be that this is a reserve planning priorities list. If we're going to include it in the reserve planning, then it would be fair to assume that we would be looking at ways on how to fund those plans in subsequent years through the Open Space Reserve Fund. We can clearly notate in the document to provide that project delivery will be subject to funding consideration for long-term financial planning.
Something along those lines, just to clarify that you're not creating an expectation these will be done without any actual year being given when it may be done either. Just to
Any further clarifying questions, Councillor Davies? Hang on, I'll come back to Andrew. Yeah,
Through you, Mayor Brad, I read something about if it's the dog park's not started before December, that it might be put off. And I was just wondering, what sort of likelihood would that be? I'm thinking it would be very slim due to the fact that, you know, how quick you got a $7.2 million foreshore development, you know, consultation, funding agreed, everything passed, and this is only 200,000 we're talking about, but what's your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yep, through you, Mayor Brad. So you're referring to at the bottom of page, wherever page that is in the agenda. So the second last page of the report that we're discussing, I've stated in the note there. So please note, should council not be comfortable that the designing and delivering this project prior to 31st of December is adequate time to consult, design and commence construction, and whether that's commence/complete. So the funding allocation that we've used in the budget for this project is the Local Community Road Infrastructure Fund, which is federal money that's been allocated to councils. We had to nominate the projects prior to the 30th of June, 31st of July, or we would lose the money. So we allocated the projects within the annual business planning process. The projects have to be complete before the 31st of December. So I guess the question is here, we are, and if we approach 31st of December and we've got exceptional circumstances, we can apply for an extension of time. The question here is, how confident is council that the notion of creating a dog park and creating the dog park at Nelson Square is going to be accepted by the community and what the community wants, that the planning process, the consultation process, and then moving into delivery is realistic, that we can expedite that process. Now, my thoughts on that are that this is a project that's been discussed for several years. We've had a petition around it. We've had support for it in various different forums. We just haven't got to that point because 2 years ago, this disappeared into the ether and didn't get adopted. So the question is, are we comfortable as a council that we're going to be able to design and deliver this project before the 31st of December? And if not, maybe we need to allocate that funding to another project which is somewhat ready to go. An example there would be Puckridge Park, because we've already got the concept design stuff for Puckridge Park. We've already allocated $100,000 to Puckridge Park. We could easily allocate another $200,000 to it, and then continue on with $300,000 worth of the work at Puckridge Park out of the concept design. It's not a question we need to answer tonight. It is something that we can judge based on feedback from the community if we get the concept design up in the next week or two. And I would suggest at the latest, next council meeting, if we need to allocate that money, that we can allocate that money back to Puckridge Park if we feel we're going to struggle with the dog park. So, but it's just a note in there, so it's on in our minds that if we feel that we're going to struggle with the timelines on this particular project, that we are comfortable that next month we may need to reallocate that money to another project.
So, I think just to clarify what Councillor Davies is asking, we have in principle been approved for that funding.
Yeah.
So the funding is available to us. We just have to meet those deadlines. And if we don't meet those, if we commit to it and we don't meet the deadlines and we ask for an extension and that's a decline,
Yeah, I understand.
well, you use it or lose it. Yeah, we don't.
So Councillor Jordan, would you like to clarify?
Following
question?
on from that, before.
Just a minute. Thank you. Councillor Broadfoot, you had a clarifying question?
Yeah, two questions. One is, we talk about Aboriginal people further down, but in the executive summary, we mention Indigenous, and we've got a small eye on that. So generally you'd put a capital, and if we're going to use Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, that's preferable than Indigenous. And I think we could look at our RAP for our language around that, perhaps. The second question was around, or for feedback, was on page 22. We talk about councils are increasingly being pressed by clubs and their governing bodies to provide high quality sporting facilities, e.g. synthetic surfaces for senior level hockey. In Port Lincoln, the Port Lincoln Hockey Association have actually funded where they are responsible for the turf, and council are responsible for the bed underneath the turf. And I just wonder about even just taking that thing in brackets out, because it like the Port Lincoln Hockey Association have already replaced the turf once, and they save money to be able to replace the turf, and council have responsibility for anything underneath that, which comes up every 2 times you change the synthetic turf. So I just think potentially that's, I mean, I know it's just an example, but it's a misleading example from the Port Lincoln experience. So I'm wondering if maybe we just drop the brackets.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Brad. Noted the referral to Indigenous peoples, and we'll correct those. And in relation to the examples there, they were broad examples to councils generally.
Yeah.
And happy to take that out, because I guess in the final review there was a few things like that which were questionable. In my understanding of the current situation is in around 6 to 8 years, council will be required to redo the subsurface, and that's going to be at some significant cost, something like $600,000 for the hockey course there. So there is considerable cost in there, but we can just clarify that so it doesn't, because we do only have one hockey association here in Port Lincoln, and it's a unique situation. So I think to generalise is probably good.
Yeah, I just wonder if we keep it general, then people, it's not even going to be raised then.
Councillor Davis, you had another question?
Just following on, I was just wondering that when council had the 60, and David might remember this, the new people might not remember this, but when we had discussions around the 60,000 for a design, I actually gave Jade the name and number for a dog park designer. I think she was working with the cat and dog management. Would that be still in your Jade's work that's followed through?
Could be through there, Brad. We can follow that up. So my understanding is that Wax, who are doing that design, they're working with a Fiona
having somebody who is, has been.
She's one of the experts that's put together the actual framework on what
That's
is,
it.
yeah.
Well
So
done, thank you.
we've engaged them to Wax as a subcontractor to help with the design. So, and I guess tonight's, motion is to help with meeting that deadline, to help with it's a tight deadline. So we would really like to get support to drive this project because I think it's a good project, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further clarifying questions? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
Other than thank you for the effort that's been put in by so many people. I think it's covering a very, very broad spectrum of our community, and certainly a document that's very workable and will be an asset in the future to other elected members and staff who come on board. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it?
Just well overdue.
Yes, I agree. Okay, is there any statements for or against?
I just want to say, yeah, thank you to Matt and the staff for getting this up and running and all the other strategies that are moving ahead. It's really good to see.
Any other statements for or against the questions? Councillor
Yeah,
Hall?
I'd just like to make a supporting statement as well. Yeah, just again reiterating this was sort of the ghost document that disappeared, and all projects were put into the open space strategy. So it's just awesome to see, despite its orange cover, to see it coming to fruition. And I think it's really great to be lining up those goal areas and making it nice and clear about the principles that we're working to. So yeah, thanks very much to everyone for your work, and look forward to seeing what feedback we get.
So, thank you. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. That was in on block, by the way. So there is an insert for the next item, item 13 point something or other. What it is?
13.4.
Yeah. Request for assistance to attend dance competition in Adelaide for MTC Dance. Matt, do you want to talk on this one?
No, through you, Mayor Brad. I guess this is the exact sort of scenario that we've created the small elected members discretionary fund, is so that when council receive requests from community groups and members of the community for these sorts of initiatives, that we can provide from that. I wish you've already heard firsthand the feedback from Dylan and Shania in terms of being able to fund their participation in the YMCA program through the elected members discretionary fund. This is a request that's coming from a school student who's a member of MTC Dance. MTC Dance is sending teams across to the state championship, state participation, and they've got a range of sponsorship options. The recommendation there is that council is fit to sponsor, that we allocate 150,000. That's going to be 150. $150 out of the elected members discretionary fund as a silver sponsorship.
How much is in the fund, mate?
$5,000.
So clarifying questions, Councillor Davies.
Could I ask a question that anything under $200 could be really up to the CEO or corporate?
No, this is a discretionary fund for the elected members, so it's up to us to decide what happens. Yeah. Everyone happy with 150? Yeah, okay. So no clarifying questions. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Rousseau, would you like to speak on it, Rob?
I just think it's great that we're doing something other than a sport. I mean, dance is, I don't see dance as a sport, but it's also a great arts thing. So I think it's great to support something else apart from our iconic sport. So it's good.
Great, thanks. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Storm, would you like to speak on it?
I think $150 is cheap sponsorship for what it would probably cost to go, what it would probably cost to travel and to participate in these events. You know, taking kids to Adelaide to gymnastics competitions and things is quite expensive. So happy to support Ruby
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
and look forward to her coming in and telling us how she went.
on your dancing. Any statements for or against or further questions? Yes, Councillor.
Torn on this one, actually, you know, it's only $150, whether you're setting a bit of a precedent to fund individuals which are part of a larger group, which I gather this is what's happening, this is one member of the group going by. What are the other members doing?
Just to clarify for you, Mayor Brad, we had the same questions. That was why it was a late report. So we held it back from the agenda just to clarify the sponsorship is for the team.
Okay.
For that exact reason.
150
One set of
people
precedent
from the
that
whole
individuals can approach us. Yeah.
So, sorry.
So, statements for or against? Yeah, questions, yeah?
Through you, Mayor Brad, do we need to have Ruby's name in there, or did the request come from her for herself?
The
Or
request came from Ruby on behalf of the team.
on behalf of the team?
Group's participation.
Yeah.
And the recommendation.
Okay, so actually, when you read it, it reads like a group.
Yeah, okay. Can I have a mover, please?
You've got Councillor Russell and you've got Councillor Storm.
Jesus, I've already done it, I'm sorry. Can I show of hands on those in favour? Motion carried. Item 14 is corporate and community reports, finance and business review of internal financial control policy. So David, do you want to go into this?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. It won't take long. There's a few policies, as councillors will see, that we're presenting tonight. There'll be a few others at the next council meeting coming up. This is a mandatory policy based on the LGA model policy. And the only main revision is that we are increasing the term to review the policy from 2 years to 4 years. I would just like to point out, this usually does go and will go to the audit committee, audit and risk committee, but given there were no material changes, we were happy to bring it to the council meeting tonight, and it will go to the audit committee meeting next month.
Thanks, David. Any clarifying questions? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Davies, can I speak on it? No. I have a second, please. Councillor Broadfoot, you want to speak on it, Andrew?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 14.1.2 is a review of the public liability insurance policy.
Thanks.
David, do you want to talk on that?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Brad. Again, with a view to rationalising as many policies as we can, councillors will see there's a few policies that are actually being revoked, where we believe it's warranted to revoke them. This is one of them. It's really is a duplication with other council documents and forms, and doesn't really serve any purpose as a standalone policy.
Thanks very much. Clarifying questions? Mover, please. Councillor Staunton, second, Councillor Dodd. Okay, not to speak on it. Okay, statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 14.1.3 is the Treasury Management Annual Report. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. Again, this is the annual report, and it basically summarises council's cash position, investments, community loans and borrowings as at the 30th of June 2021. It also shows the positive impact that the Treasury management process is having in reducing our interest charges on the Bendigo Bank variable interest loan. I would just like to highlight, Councillor Dodd just mentioned this, in the schedule, in the attachment that's provided, we say payments during the past 12 months on both those tables. It's actually movements in and out. So it's payments made out or money received. And again, just to clarify, the lending portion is what we have lent to community groups, and the next portion, which is the borrowings, is the money that we have borrowed from the LGFA and or Bendigo Bank and our council borrowings.
Okay, thanks. Any clarifying questions for that? Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor, sorry, Jack. Thank you, Mayor Jack. Yeah. Do you want to speak on it, Jack? Okay, can I have a second, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it? Clarifying question, sorry. Statements for and against. All those in favour? Motion carried. .1.4 is the update fees charges schedule.
What do you
Thanks,
do?
Mayor Brad. So council has already approved the memorial tree plaque fee. But staff believe it would be appropriate to have a non-refundable reservation fee for those members of the community who may wish to pre-book and reserve a position on the tree, which is what the first addition is. And then the second one is the RV parking permits, which need to be included in the fees and charges schedule.
Okay. Any questions? No. Yes, councillor.
So in relation to fees and charges, I was a bit loath to talk about some of these things, but the tenure on some of the plots, graves, whatever, out at the cemeteries, we have 2 cemeteries, one at North Shields and one at Happy Valley. Is there to be discussion in time to come in relation to some of those sites are forever? Some may have a tenure as in other, I could see some smiley eyes, in areas that could be 25, 30, 40 years, looking at across the state, across Australia, across the world, the challenges that can be faced and may be faced in the future in relation to these sites. They're very sacred, they're very important to people, but maybe it's a topic of conversation at a later stage rather than here and now.
Through you, Mayor Brad, it's a topic that's dear to my heart, having been at Centennial Park for 7 years and dealing with this specific issue and matter. It is something that we've discussed internally that we will need to develop a cemetery management policy. We will need to look at future funding and current remaining useful life in terms of available stock within the current cemeteries. We will need to consider those notions of limited tenure and reuse of graves at some point in the future. It's not something that I would be suggesting we need to allocate sufficient time to within the next 2 to 3 years, but it is something that within the next 5 to 10 years we will need to address.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Staunton, you want to speak on it? Another second, please. Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
No, thank you.
Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried, thank you. Item 14.1.5 is the Port Lincoln Football League landlord consent. Now, you've got a conflict of interest.
I'll declare a conflict of interest, but I'll stay.
Right, thank you.
It's just to proceed.
Yep, okay, so over to you, David, if you
Thanks, Mayor Brad. I'm actually, Dom's done the work in the background there. So Dom, if there's anything you want to add to the report?
I think it's all stated in the report.
Any questions?
Okay, so is there any clarifying questions on the report at all? No? So can I have a mover then, please?
Hold up, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yep, hang on, Rob. Yep, go, Andrew.
Oh, I just wonder about when we're looking at the management of Ravendale as well, like how does this development potentially for the touch footy, because touch footy's been played out there as well, and I noticed they put in a support letter, and I'm in support, I'm in support of them developing it, but I just wondered about how we're thinking we rationalise that with Ravendale as a sports centre as well. If Dom's got any thoughts.
Well, I'll take that one, Mayor Brad.
Thank you.
So I guess usually when a request comes in for landowner consent, depending on what the nature of it is, I will generally consider and endorse the matter under delegation from council. So for example, we had a similar request for a funding application which is going to be submitted from tennis for installing lighting for the tennis courts. Now that's a different scenario because there's no built structures which are going to create or consume space which is not currently consumed. So I've provided landowner consent for that one under delegation. This one's brought to council because it's a new structure which is going to be visible, and from my past experience, anything that's visible can sometimes be contentious within council environments. So that's why it's on the table for discussion tonight. To clarify the use of that, I'm less concerned around the designated uses than I am concerned around the actual structure being installed there.
And in the context of the draft open space strategy, we've just endorsed a strategy that says we're going to do master planning on these 2 facilities in the next 2 years. So we met with the chairperson of the league and supporting people and the person running the grant, just to clarify that what they're proposing and the money they're willing to invest if they get the funding to build this structure, they're comfortable that if we do a master plan in 2 years' time and that structure needs to be demolished, relocated, whatever it is, that they're comfortable that that's a risk they're willing to take, given that they are comfortable allocating their co-contribution of funding for this application. So I guess in that context, from my perspective, from our perspective, it was more about ensuring that we weren't going to be providing landowner consent to something that would then throw up barriers for a master planning process down the track. And the master planning process will be based on intended usages. The usages somewhat will be informed through a sport and recreation strategy, and then we'll have that discussion around Ravendale and Centenary Oval and what role both facilities play in there. So that's a rather long-winded way of getting around to answering your question, but I'm hoping it's answered your question.
Yeah, that's good. You're across it. I was just checking that we're looking at all of those angles. So, yep, of course you're across it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rouse, so are you going to move it?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want to speak on it?
I just want to say, and I suppose just is supported, we do need more coverage at Centenary. The weather can be very variable both in summer and winter, and I think it's just going to, and as you would have seen with the letters of support there, it's going to promote more use of Centenary at the times that it can be available, and it's so much of it's not going to be pending weather. You know, at least you're going to have an area that is covered or is undercover, and heaters can be put in there in winter, etc. So that you haven't got people choosing not to go to an event because of the weather. So, you know, just things like that, I think it's great. And the fact that they are prepared to have that risk if it does need to be changed with the open strategy plan. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And it's not costing us anything. That's the important bit.
Can I have a second, please? Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
I think it's a great concept. I think it provides shelter for all sports. COVID is very much part of it. And also too, just with the design, there's, I think, an opportunity, whether it's cricket, whether it's football, whether it's touch football, where each of those areas can actually be cordoned off and utilised as a marketing strategy, and also to have specific groups there, hire them out, and things like that. So there's the potential for any of those individual sports that have a facility or an involvement with Centenary Oval, that there is the opportunity to not only have some smart feature to the whole ground, but also to an opportunity to fundraise extra funds to
Thanks very much. Can I have any statements for or against or questions? All those in favour? Motion carried. 14.2 is people governance and communications. A review of the work experience and work placements policy. David, not really much in that, isn't there, is it?
No, it's again, part of the rationalisation to revoke. It's not a mandated policy. The LGA doesn't recommend a separate policy for this, and so our recommendation is to revoke it.
Okay, thanks. Clarifying questions. I have a mover, please. Councillor Staunton, want to speak on it?
Straightforward.
Deputy Mayor Jack, you want to speak on it? Okay. Statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. 14.2.2 is review of the complaints handling policy. Going, same.
Again, fairly straightforward. Follows the recommended process outlined in the LGA's model complaints policy, reflects current practice, and minor amendments have been made.
We're going to be so sleek and efficient the way we're going. Close to my heart, getting rid of useless policy that's replicating a regulation in the legislation.
You know, getting complaints.
That's the point. So, any clarifying questions at all? Councillor Davis.
Through you, Mayor Bragg, please excuse my ignorance for staring me in the face here, but can you tell me why is the water retail code and minor intermediate retailers a related document to this policy? For the life of me, I just couldn't find it. Maybe it's staring me in the face. Explain.
If I'm not mistaken, through you, Mayor Brad, it's because if there is any complaints with regards to that, it has to be recorded as part of our reporting process through ISCOSA on our water reuse. So I think that's why that's, if I'm pretty sure that's.
So it's a completely separate, because it's another government department. Maybe that's the involvement of another government department, and if it relates to water retail code. So
yes,
along those lines. Thank you.
Okay, can I have a mover, please?
I've got a question.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, I tried to touch something and I disappeared, but I've just got a question about, is there anything or any standard around vexatious complaints or people that are taking up a lot of time and energy with series of complaints against elected members or for council? I note that we've strengthened the policy in looking at people who are abusive or whatever within the office environment, but I'm wondering how we sit with just ongoing vexatious complaints, and whether we need to consider that.
It's actually under the Act, isn't it?
Through you, Mayor Brad, there are template policies for unreasonable complainants that have been endorsed and adopted, and I do have a couple of those that I'm looking at to potentially bring to council in the coming months.
Great, I look forward to that. Thank you.
As I said, it's under the legislation as well.
Thanks, Brad.
Mayor Brad, if I may, just to clarify, I thought I had a note on this, Councillor Davis. It's any changes to the policy may need to be endorsed by SCOSA as per our obligations under the water retail code.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we have to sign in back.
Thank you.
You're right, you're right. Can I have a mover then, please? Yeah, Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
Thank you.
Second? Need a second. Councillor Broadfoot, you want to speak on it? Okay, all those in favour? Motion carried. Please, if I go through these policy changes too quickly for you, and I miss you, just stick your hand up and jump up and down, and I'll come back. Item 14.2.3, review of council members' training and development policy. David, do you want to speak on that?
Thanks, Mayor Brad. Again, just briefly, in terms of the Act, a council must prepare and adopt a training and development policy for its members. So this policy is based on the model policy developed by the LGA and meets the required purpose to assist members in the performance of their functions and duties and complies with the requirements prescribed in the regulations.
Okay, clarifying questions? Councillor Davies?
Through you, Mayor Brad, just say processes change. Again, this policy would be taken into consideration and trained, retrained.
Through you, Mayor Brad, are you saying if a process changes?
If a process
yes.
within, in-house changes.
Sorry, no, this is for councillors training. So this policy is in respect of training for councillors.
Yeah, so we can, it's an option to be retrained as well.
For councillors to be retrained?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and that is in the policy.
If processes change, it can be retrained.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is just replacing an out-of-date policy with another one. Yeah. Okay, any clarifying questions further? No, the mover, please. Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
But can I just say, I will make a comment. In relation to policies, over the last 9 years, there has been a gradual transition. So a lot of our policies were so bedded down with procedure, it just about killed me. And I responded to a lot of policy drafts, but I'm beginning to see now that we've got some clarity. It got to the point where staff wouldn't give me a draft in case I commented on it, I'm sure, because there is a very, very big difference between policy and procedure. And I think from an operational point of view, all of our policies had the procedure and the operational stuff inside those policies. So I am really keen to see that we actually articulate it in great detail, and I think we're beginning to get there. particularly these couple that I've read tonight too. All right, so thank you to the staff.
I think the other thing is the LGA is putting out templates that we can follow, which makes it a hell of a lot more streamlined.
Yeah, because they were very much a procedural policy. They weren't a policy as they should stand.
And plus also a lot of them were replicating legislation and regulation that was already there. There's no need to redo it. So, yeah, Councillor Rouse, so you were going to second, were you? Do you want to speak on it, Ron? Okay. Any statements for and against? Or against, rather? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 14.2.4 is a review of internal review of council decisions policy 9632. David.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. Again, this relates to our legislative obligations under the Act and is in line with the recommendation of the Ombudsman SA 2016 report.
Beauty. Is there any clarification questions? No. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it? Can I have a second, please? Deputy Mayor Jack, do you want to speak on it? Okay. Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Good having Deputy Mayor. Item 14.3 is the Community Culture and Recreation Tennis SA State League All-Stars visit proposal. Over to you again, David.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Melina's put as much information in the report as possible. We believe it's definitely worth supporting this proposal. It will mean a budget provision, which is also what we're coming to council to ask.
Yeah, it's reallocation of funds essentially, isn't it?
No, not in this case, Mayor Brad. That was last year's, where we were able to reallocate funds that hadn't been utilised. This would be an actual increase in the budget for the 21-22 financial year.
Any clarifying questions? Councillor Davies.
Can I ask through you, Mayor Brad, why aren't Tennis SA actually, because the community fund applications have gone out, why aren't they applying through that avenue?
Through you, Mayor Brad. It's largely to do with timing. So I guess they're looking to get approval to proceed with this within the next week, so they can start booking in all the accommodation requirements, all the players. The process effectively has stemmed from the Tennis SA wanting to do a pre-season launch event in a regional area. The Tennis SA representatives were actually here a few months ago meeting with the association locally, and then they also attended the workshop that we held in the evening to the sporting association groups. And from that, they were then conceived the idea of having that here in Port Lincoln. From our perspective, it ties in nicely with the sponsorship we've provided and the support we're providing for the Port Lincoln Basketball Association. So we're effectively going to have the 8th, 9th and 10th if it proceeds with Tennis SA, and then the 11th through to the 15th with the Port Lincoln Basketball Association and the Adelaide Lightning. So within that period of a week leading into spring and summer, we've got the potential to have state tennis association stars here, including a potential, they're looking at potential speakers who is either going to be John Fitzgerald, Todd Woodbridge, or even Yvonne Goolgong-Corley as a potential speaker to showcase the event. That would then flow into what we've already approved and endorsed and supporting, which is the 4 days of basketball, the Adelaide Lightning. So it would actually just make a really nice showcase for the sport on the Eyre Peninsula leading into spring. Having sport in that schedule. Since the conversation we've had with them, they're also having a conversation with the association locally, and then they'll be looking at additional fundraising for that, but purely down to timing. Otherwise, we would have preferred them through the community process.
Thank you.
So,
Got a
any other
question.
clarifying questions?
Question, Mayor Brad.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Faye. Andrew.
I was just wondering about, in the event of COVID restrictions, what's the fallback position? Would that be just a postponement, or have they got some sort of risk management plan around that?
Through you, Mayor Brad, we'll need to work through that with both both those events are leading to that. I'll have to take that on notice.
Yeah. Okay. So we'd have an event management standard or risk, I suppose.
Yeah, so we're not organising the event, so we won't be responsible for that. But I guess the question is more in terms of protecting council's investment and sponsorship of events.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, Councillor Davis, you were going to move away?
Yes.
You want to speak on it?
I think that having both of these events very close together is a good thing during school holidays. I also take on board what Councillor Broadfoot has said, but at the same time, I think that yes, there is a risk factor, but sometimes you just have to invest and hope to heck that it's all going to go ahead. So I think that's the world in which we live at the moment. Sometimes we are going to have to make some risks on behalf of the community and think of it as a positive investment. If it doesn't come about, well, we just as a community wear it, but we hope in anticipation that we can have it at another time.
Councillor Rousseau, you're going to second it, will you?
Yes, thank you.
Want to speak on it?
No, I just think it's a fabulous opportunity for Port Lincoln. It's just, I think it's wonderful how so many people now want to come to Port Lincoln, and it's a great way of showcasing us. And everyone's going to benefit from the hotels, from the retail, etc. So I fully support something like this.
So, second, any statements for or against? Questions? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 15 is the Environment and Infrastructure Reports, Playground Funding Reallocation. JP, you're going to talk on that one.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Brad. Just with this particular one, so in the current business plan, we have $91,000 allocated to the train playground. This allocation came from the local roads and community infrastructure funding, which we spoke about earlier, which has got the condition around the end of end of calendar year, use it or lose it kind of principle. We identified two areas of concern and other playground areas. One was at Harbour View Park and the other one was down at Flinders Park, where there was some playground equipment that we no longer can actually maintain to a safe standard, and therefore I've made a call to actually get that removed at the Harbour View Park, and then we are monitoring the one at Flinders Park very closely. The report here tonight is to kind of work through the risk associated with actually getting the train playground finished by December 30 and utilising that allocation of funding, whether we are able to utilise that funding to replace the playground equipment that we know is actually damaged and absolutely destroyed and removed in the one park, and then allocate $10,000 new to actually support the design of the community consultation process for the train playground. So I guess it's really here tonight to ask, instead of spending the $91,000 on one particular playground, to reallocate that funding so that we can actually replace some much needed equipment that is in a very, very poor condition. And then also the additional $10,000 to continue with the commitment to Council's resolution to look into the design and the community consultation around the training playground. That's it in a nutshell, but
Okay, any clarifying questions? Can I have a mover then, please?
Clarifying question.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
JP, did you give any consideration to reallocating 81,200, leaving 10,000 train?
we actually did.
We did through there. It come down to the need to expend that funds and complete the projects by the 31st of December. If we're using $10,000 out of that $91,000 for planning, that won't be completed as a project before 31st of December. We can't just say that the planning component is the project itself, which is the reason for the effectively reverting back to the original resolution of council. So the original resolution of council was to allocate funds this year to do the design work and then remove the equipment in the following year. We got excited through the budgeting process that we had the LCRI funding, and we basically said, well, let's just allocate the money to get the playground done this year. Upon reflection of that and seeing what's actually happening out on the ground, as we discussed at the workshop, we're now of the view that we should be going back to the intention of the original council resolution, which was to allocate money to plan train playground in terms of its replacement, and then use the $91,000 and actually allocate the equipment that's end of useful life. Well and truly.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Storm?
Where would that additional $10,000 come from?
Through Brett, so that would need to be a budget revision. BR1. Additional funding. Okay.
Yeah, like, we borrow that money from.
We've got the cash flow, we've got the
Yes,
cash
it is.
resources to cover it, it's just, it will be an operational revision.
Okay. So we've got the money that's needed.
Yes, we've got
Okay.
the cash resources to cover that.
That's okay. I thought there was a money tree somewhere that I didn't know about.
Councillor Davis, you would like to move it or comment?
No, I just wanted to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
So, okay, we are deferring the train playground, where then, and we are attending to some of the issues that, or things, priorities that have been in relation to the open space strategy. In relation to the playground equipment, where does the train playground then fit into the open space strategy? And how are we going to then include that somehow, somewhere?
Through you,
So,
Brad.
when you look at the priorities and the budgeting, I'm just wondering, you know, how you're going to manage making those funds available next year or the year after,
Through you, Mayor Brad. Fundamentally, the train playgrounds, in our opinion, isn't a reserve plan per se. It is effectively trying to negotiate through the community discussion around the importance of the train. So a key question that needs to be answered in there is, are we keeping the train? And we've actually road tested this when we've been out on site a few times by asking people who are using the reserve by saying, would you prefer to have a train that you can look at but you can't play on, or would you rather have more play value and not have a train? And the responses have generally been, well, what's a train playground without a train? And then after a few seconds, people then go, but we would probably like more things to play on. So I think the issue here is there's going to need to be, it's already a protracted issue that we haven't resolved yet, that we need to resolve. But I think we need to work through the essence of what the train playground is, because people know it as the train playground. What that constitutes is, once we get through that process, there's likely to be funding allocated to replacing playground equipment. That wouldn't be, in my mind, deemed to be a reserve planning process or you know, a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 project. We're talking maybe a $40,000 to $60,000 project to replace the equipment.
I'll be quite honest, I shouldn't be making these statements, I suppose. I think that we've over-capitalised on that space in this community for all the purpose and what it's used for, and do we need it in the future? But that's another topic of conversation. There's looking at me, but put my mask back on. I'm hiding now.
Yep, okay, so thank you. Any further clarifying questions?
Oh,
Councillor
How
Storm?
does that comment on the train playground? If,
No,
um,
you can ask a question.
what was it called before the train was put there? Because before, it's only been called train playground when the train was put there. Before that, it was not called the train
You're
playground.
learning.
That was my question. What was it called before it was train
Yeah.
playground?
Take that on notice, and that's part of the process we'll need to go through with the planning is to understand the history of the reserves. So similar to what we've done with Wayne and Nelson, we've dug out history and the origins of those reserves, and that'll be incorporated into that planning process and discussion. It could even be a conversation where it's a process where we determine to go out to the community. If the train gets removed or it doesn't remain there, and there needs to be increased play value in there, or increased amenity somehow, then the conversation could very well be going out to the community saying, well, if it's not going to be the train playground, what do we want to make it? And that could be a separate conversation and separate dialogue. So that's part of the story moving forward. So I don't think we're going to resolve that before the 31st.
So that consultation is what that $10,000 would be for.
Yes.
Councillor Davies, did you have another question?
One question, I was going to mention my history knowledge on that. But I don't think I'm allowed to.
Go.
Oh, you're allowed to. I think what happened with the train playground was we actually got given a South Australian train, and it was a rigid ditch, and it's on the track as per se now. We got given a dodgy one to take its place, which is now what the problem is. So I think that the actual train playground was originated around a train. But,
There was.
but we'll see.
The playground was there before the train was built. Yeah, it used to flood before. Used to be swings and a really big metal slippery
Long time ago.
and then a train, then it's called train.
Okey doke. Thanks. No more clarifying questions. So,
I could ask a question,
go
and
on.
that is, could that be the first place we name an Aboriginal name and get rid of the train altogether?
Yeah, I think that's a rhetorical question for you, Mayor Brown.
Yes.
I think these are conversations that we have at the stage of the process. I think just to clarify, the recommendation there is to allocate $10,000 through budget review 1 to allow for planning. And we may not need the $10,000 to have that dialogue and consultation with the community in the planning. The second part of the recommendation is to reallocate the existing $91,000 into replacement of play equipment at Harbourview Reserve and Flinders Park. I will note that we will use a small amount of that money to put fencing around the existing train. So rather than have bunting around it, which we've got at the moment, we are going to install some pool fencing or something similar around as a temporary measure, because it's going to be there for another 12 months or so. We don't want it looking with orange bunting tape around like we're not doing.
Okay, so we're still in clarifying questions. Hang on a second.
So I'm happy to move it.
Okay.
I just had a question, sorry.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
it okay? Is there any reason why we're just not taking the train away? It's obviously dangerous, the bunting doesn't work. Wouldn't it be easier to just get rid of the train rather than putting up something stable around there, kids can still try and climb over?
I think that's part of the conversation that council's had previously. In the standing resolution is the council determines what's going to go there before the country.
Okay, I'm going to move this. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Davies, would you like to speak on it?
Carry on.
Councillor Staunton, you want to second it? You want to speak on it? Statements for and against? Questions? All those in favour? Motion carried. Right. Item 15.2 is development services, revocation of building and swimming pool inspection policy. JP, you want to speak on that quickly, mate?
Not really much, I don't know, I'll probably take that as read, but I've got some questions if that's okay.
Yep. So any questions, clarifying questions? None. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Davies, do you want to speak on it?
No.
Councillor, can I have a second one, please? Second. Looking for a second. Councillor Dodd, do you want to speak on it? Yeah. No. Statements for and against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 15.3, the Environment and Community Safety Plastic Free SA Port Lincoln Program. There's a report being provided for information. Dave, do you want to talk on that at all?
Yeah, just quick background on that one. I've got Narelle here who's been actively working and leading the charge on this and did the report for me. So I'll be directing any questions through myself, obviously, to Narelle. Thank you for being here, Narelle. But fundamentally, since March, the Single-Use Plastic Act came into effect. So the first thing of its kind in this sort of legislation in Australia, and around 2022, there's expectation that this is also going to start affecting the use of the foam cups and bowls and other accessories. So the intent of this program is to help support businesses to how to move away from those sort of single-use plastics and provide free assistance for food retailers and so forth. The program is open for around 6 months to all food retailers, and yeah, I think it's a great incentive, and just would like to, I guess, gain council's feedback and see, we'll provide some information, and if there's any questions around it.
Okay. Any clarifying questions at all? Davies has left the room.
Councillor Ritchie,
We still have a,
is talking but on mute.
Okay.
It was just, it's not a question, but just noting that there's not a recommendation there. So no question.
no question? Okay, thanks. All right. Jack's let us know that he hasn't got a question. So. Thanks, mate. Okay, can I have a mover, please?
It's for information only, Brad.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no mover.
Sorry.
Yep.
There you go. Jack, did you want to make a comment?
Thanks, Mayor Brand, as well. It's just that I think this is a great opportunity for Port Lincoln, and it's good to see it coming together, and it's great that the council staff has supported that as well. So, yeah, excellent.
Thanks, mate, for time.
That was my question now from it. So.
Okay, no worries. Item 15.4 is major project confidential council committee reports and minutes. We're looking for an extension of confidential order over a property matter. Do you want to talk on that? If there's anything to talk about?
No, Mayor Brad, it's just last meeting we had the review of confidential orders, and this is purely just the extension of an order on a matter that was dealt with council in September last year. The recommendation is
No, we're not confidential.
the matter hasn't been resolved, so the recommendation is there is to keep the matter in confidence for another 12 months.
Sure. Okay, so there's no details there, so we're not in, just for information, we're not in confidence at the moment. So is there any clarifying questions required? Hang on. No. Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Rouse, do you want to speak on it? No, a second, please. Councillor Staunton, would you like to speak on it? No. Statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Actually, there was votes against, then what?
Jack Fraser.
Didn't vote.
So I'll just do a re-vote on that. All those in favour?
Technical issue.
Motion carried. So now we're about to go into conference.